So today, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at how we can draw our lines of best fit and how we can create scatter plots within Desmos. So this particular file has already been shared out to you, a Google Doc that's going to walk us through exactly how to enter in our scatter plots and how to do our lines of best fit. To do this, we're going to use an example I have on the top right, or not the top right, but on the top of the page. This is the same example we were using the other day when we were doing our lines of best fit by hand. So we have a coach who's tracking his soccer team over time, how many shots the team has taken, and how many goals are being scored. So let me just open up Desmos, and I'll keep this sheet open on the left so we can refer to it. The first thing I need to do is I need to plot my data. So in order to do this, I'm going to say add item, and I'm going to add a new table. So it creates X and Y for me already. Now what we decided the other day was that the number of shots that the team takes is going to be the independent variable, the X, and the number of goals scored is the dependent variable, Y. So let's just go ahead and enter in this data as it appears in the table. And for the Y's, there we go. Now, when we enter that data, notice it's not showing up on the screen. Now, why isn't it showing up on the screen? It's because all of our shots are way too high. My screen only goes from -10 to +10. So what can I do? Well, one, I could start zooming out, and there's my data over on the right-hand side here. Or the other thing I can do is I can manually adjust what I want my screen to look like. So that's step 2. I've given some suggestions for this particular example. It's going to be up to you to choose what values you want for every particular example. So here's the thought of what we're going to do. I'm going to go to the wrench icon here, our graph settings, and I'm going to manually type in what I want my X and Y values to be, what my scale is going to be. 4x is the number of shots I have. Now I can't have less than 0 shots, so you would think I'm going to go with 0 here. Normally I like to give myself a little bit of room just so I can see my axes, so I'm actually going to type that in as -1. That way you can see I can actually see what my line is on the left hand side. The maximum number of shots I have was down here in the last game was 38, but I always like to give myself a little bit of extra room, so I'm going to go up to say 50. So now on the x-axis, I'm going from -1 to 50. On the y-axis, I'm going to do the same thing. Now, in theory, the lowest number of goals I can score is 0, but again, just to give myself some visual room, I'm going to go -1. And then the maximum number of goals I've scored, well, 65 seems a little ridiculous. My highest one here is 4, so maybe I'll go up as high as 6, and I can always change this later. But you can see that centers all of my data quite nicely on my screen. So there's my scatter plot. Okay, and you can click on any of these points and see exactly what the coordinates are for those points. That's part 1. Part 2, now I have to draw my line of best fit, and this is what's on the second page. Now, an equation of the line is y equals mx plus b. But I can't just type that into Desmos because it doesn't know what m and b are, so it's not going to give me a line. We need to try to figure out what m and b are from the line of best fit that we're going to create. So what we're going to do is we're going to write that equation, but we're writing it a little bit different. First off, instead of just y, we're going to write y1. Okay? Now, the reason we write y1 is because notice up here in my table of values, it creates x1 and y1. And that's because if I created more data sets, I could use x2 and y2, x3 and y3. So you just need to make sure that whatever this number is up in your table of values matches the number down here. So we're going to say y1. Now, instead of saying equals, we're going to use the tilde. It's that little squiggly symbol. If you're using a keyboard, it's up on the top left-hand side of your keyboard. And this is what tells Desmos we're doing an approximation. That tells Desmos we're doing a line of best fit. So y1 tilde, and then m for our slope, x1 plus b. And just like that, you can see it draws the line of best fit for us. Now, when you do that, you get a whole bunch of numbers down here, and we can talk about what these numbers are now. First off, it tells us what our m and our b value are. So I can tell from this then the equation of the line that they gave us is y equals 0.11x minus 0.84. Okay, so there's our equation of the line as generated by Desmos. Now, the other thing they give us here is this r and r squared value. If you take stats courses later on, we can get more into exactly what these numbers are and how they're generated. But for our purposes right now, I just want to look at the r squared value. Okay? The r squared value is basically an indication of how good your line of best fit is. If all of the points were exactly on the line, then the r squared value would be 1, meaning 100%. Okay? So ideally, a perfect line of best fit has an r squared value of 1. Our r squared value is 0.58. We want it to be close to 1. So this we could think of as about 58% accurate. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. So using the language we have in the past, I would say this is probably moderately well fitting our data in this case. So the correlation is certainly there. It's not super strong, but it is moderately strong, I would say. So we want to always use this r squared value in order to justify how good the line of best fit is. Okay. Now, once we have this, we can now answer any of the questions we had earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and just expand this up a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. From the questions the other day, we were wondering, for instance, how many goals would we expect to score if I took 40 shots? So if I said x equals 40, I get my line right here, and I can read off at 40 shots, I would expect to score maybe 3.75. So maybe I'd round that up and say I would score between 3 and 4, or I would score 4 goals. Or I could say, okay, if I were to score maybe 5 goals, how many shots would I expect to have taken? So if I say y equals 5, zoom out a little bit, you can see to get 5 goals, I probably had to take maybe 50 or 51 shots in order to make that happen. Now, what's great is because this is now in Desmos, I can zoom out or zoom in as much as I want, and so I can do something silly and say, well, what if I were to take 100 shots in a game? So x equals 100, how many goals would I expect to score? Right? Based on that, if I took 100 shots in a game, I'd probably score 10 or 11 goals. So because this is in a graphing calculator now, one, I can zoom in and out to interpolate or extrapolate really extreme values, which I can't do if I'm graphing by hand. But also, because this line of best fit was generated by the computer, it is the perfect line of best fit, or it is the best line of best fit that can be created. When we're doing this manually, we're adjusting our ruler and we're kind of using our best judgment. This is the ideal scenario and the line that best fits the data that we've given the computer. So that's how we can use Desmos in order to create a line of best fit, and then once we have that equation, we can do anything we could normally with our line of best fit or equation of the line of best fit. But this way it's much more accurate. So there you go, guys. Take that, run with it, practice with it, and if you have questions, email us. Good luck.